Using only chess.com review is stunting your growth. Do this instead. So this is a game I played against Julia Efremova. So this is a Ukrainian women's international master, very talented player at 2450 on chess.com and has been doing a lot of improvement. I'm around 2400 and I'm trying to build up the process to actually get me to 2600. What does it actually take to get quickly realize that chess.com reviews are just not enough, right? So accuracy is just that rating. You don't know how calculation is made. You don't know if you truly position. The accuracies are completely all over the place, and I don't really believe that I can trust them. And on top of that, the AI explanations are just not that good. I'm trying to go to the next level, actually use a couple of major things to improve I'm going to cover that now. So the evaluation bar, I do actually use this. So this is useful. How volatile is my play? Does it get extremely volatile towards the end? Does it slowly drift towards me? So in this case, I'm black, so it looks like a pretty good game, but there's still some key moments that I want to cover, and I want to understand if there are different ways of playing that might have some better practical chances. Book moves, important, but playing a bunch of theory is okay, but did you crucially understand the position? Because there are trillions of combinations, because someone goes off theory just that tiny bit, and if you just completely lose it, then you just don't understand the position. So let's get into this. So white plays d4, knight f6, bishop f4. So you can see here that we're already playing, or white, Julia is playing the London system. So it's not super exciting, but yeah, it's where you play c3, you play knight bd2, bishop d3 or bishop e2, you castle, etc. I play c5 here instead of d5 first. So c5, the idea here is that if something like takes, I've always got queen a5 and takes back, or I can start to threaten this line by playing moves like knight e4, etc. But usually white doesn't take on c5 and just continues as normal and plays extremely solidly. Now here we get to a pretty typical position where I've developed in the center, so has white. It's extremely solid. I'm probably have a little bit more control over some of the key squares. However, white has the key e5 square, and there's not much in this position, to be honest. Like, white is probably slightly better because of this square, but so what? And this is partly why some of the kind of the super GMs are not really loving the London system, because it's hard to get kind of clear-cut advantages. So I play b6 here, and now this is already a point where I want to start looking at the Ultradatabase, and why is that? Because I want to see what other people are playing, right? Is there a different strategy that's having better evaluations on an engine side, but also on a score percentage, right? So, for example, here you can see that this position has been reached 200-300 times, and yes, there's some pretty good elos from white, elos on black. It's a pretty mixed position, but it looks like there are so many combinations of things that can be played. Now, what you want as black is to have a lower score, so something less than 50%, i.e. the ones in green, and you don't want to have ones which are in black, which are probably a little bit less promising. So I know here, for example, that I played b6, which is one of the popular moves, and actually looks like it's got a really good practical win rate. Again, for black, lower is better. And you can see that black actually wins 41.2%. But again, here I want to say, look, is my move reasonable? Is it played by some of the best players in the world? And does it give me practical chances? And the answer is yes. Now let's actually turn on the engine here. This is also very useful. You can start to see where do things lie. And this is what's really interesting, right? The engine in this case has 3 lines. We can add up one more, for example, here, because there's probably multiple ways. And you can see that almost all of them have really similar evaluations. And this is what people don't really like about this, is that black and white, they don't really have too many opportunities to make mistakes. But it looks like b6 is fine, so let's continue from there, and let's just turn off the engine for now. I'm leaning towards turning off the engine just to have a kind of more critical viewpoint. So knight bd2, again, we're still in a position where there's still hundreds of games. Bishop e7, and now knight e5, and these are all very, very standard moves, and you can still see there's multiple 2500s, 2600s, 2700s who are playing this position. And here's where I played a move which I felt that actually in reality people don't play very often, and in reality, they do. I played knight d7, and the idea of knight d7 is that I try to play e6 and f6 and try to control these squares. The crucial idea is that f6 and e5. At least that was what my idea was. But what you'll see is that actually people are not playing f6, e5 too much, and so this is probably not the right approach. At least with the idea of f6, e5, but the idea of knight d7 and trying to trade off these pieces seems pretty sound. So I played knight d7 and knight f3. So white is basically really trying to control the e5 square. But the reason why this is less exciting is that white is basically allowing trading of all of these pieces. So bishop, knight, knight, for knight, bishop, knight here. So you're getting rid of all your pieces almost instantly. Now, let's go a little bit deeper. I played f6 here, and I'm pretty confident here that this is wrong. So let's have a look at the engine. So you'll see that actually already f6 is not in the top 3 moves. And what it wants me to do here is to basically take the 0.0. So it's basically a line like something like this, and then queen c7 at the end of it. So here I played f6, so this is what I actually played, and you can see that the engine does not like this, and this is what gives white a clear advantage. But the crucial problem here is that I don't know why that's the case. In my calculation, it was basically that after if I actually turn this off, it was knight takes c6, bishop takes c6. I've got control over this e5 square, and I'm going to play this next. And if he does something like takes, I'm still controlling this square with the bishop, so I'm doing okay. But I knew that there was some way that there was going to be some problems here with this line, right? So whether it was like with c4 or e4 trying to break this open, but I couldn't quite understand why that's the case. So what you'll see here is that there is one clear breakthrough, which is c4. And this is how I actually went through this, was that instead of, as soon as I play f6, instead of playing knight 67, the way that you can almost get a +1 kind of improvement is first knight takes c6, bishop takes, and then play c4. And the idea here is that actually I've played f6 to like protect these squares and actually try and make e5 work. But in reality, what's going to happen is light squares around my king is extremely weak. And so what am I doing here? After something like takes, this is actually a big problem. All these squares become extremely weak. And after takes, you've even got something like d5, bishop b7, bishop c4, and suddenly I've lost the space. This square is really uncomfortable. Let's just show that for a second. And even threatening things like d6, e4, queen d3, rook e1, just getting your pieces into nice places. And suddenly I've not been able to break through. And this is something I absolutely did not see with my line. And so after bishop takes c6, c4, and I can see why this is really uncomfortable, right? Something like e5 is supposedly the best move here, but this is getting really murky because I'm now not in complete control here. I can't take this pawn with another pawn. So something like this is already starting to prove a little bit uncomfortable. If I do something like pawn takes, which is a big blunder, I have to take here to protect this. And I'm starting to get myself into a bit of a problem here because although my pieces are in decent squares, after something like takes, we have isolated pawns, isolated pawn here in the middle, so that's 3 pawn structures, while white has just 2. And these squares are still really weak, specifically the ones around my king. And so there is ways here that white can actually start to eke out some small advantages, and this is not really the way I wanted to go about it. So this is why f6 is not so good, and that's because of the immediate strike in the light squares here. So let's see what my opponent played. They played knight takes d7, queen takes d7, and after d takes e5, I started to feel quite comfortable because you'll see that I've actually got the pawns in the middle. It's not a bishop in the middle, it's the pawns in the middle. And so after c4, he's trying to do the whole break, but this time I've got the crucial win here, which is d4. So I keep my pawns in the middle instead of using the pieces or even isolating the bishop or the pawn structures. I can maintain kind of single structures, and that's what's going to give me the big edge here. So after pawn takes, Julia moves the bishop back in the hope that this is going to give her some tempi to to try and break the structure because she knows that I'm going to play e4, f5, etc. But in reality, this is just not doing anything because I'm still going to play e5. Now, queen b3 is played with some ideas of trying to break through on the queen side, but again, this is just a bit too slow because I just start to roll my pieces forward. Now, after knight d2, f5. And so here, again, you can see that actually, although my white light squares are weak, I know that my king's going to go on h8, and actually you can't really do much. There's not much you can do here. And so Julia tries to do some sort of c5, knight c4, knight d6. But in reality, I just said, hey, look, I'm not really that worried. I'm just going to go for it, and I'm going to try and break through on this king. This king is very weak. I've got a lot of space here, and I'm going to use it. So, and I'm going to always pause at these inaccuracies because they are, of course, very important. But after bishop d6, I play d3. Now, this is a super important point, right? So I've basically said, I'm leaving my rook here. I don't care about my rook. I'm going to just keep going after your pieces. After d3, bishop, I'm basically sacking the exchange in the hopes here that I'm going to be able to just keep pushing through. So after bishop takes f8, rook takes, this is what I was planning. You have to move the bishop, otherwise you're basically losing your bishop. And here I've got knight d4, and I've just, if you look at my pieces, they're all pointing towards the king. This is protecting my king. This is ready to really start striking. My rook's facing this way. My knight's in a great square, and I've got great positional strengths and space. So in this position, actually decides to just move the bishop back to say, hey, look, I like my bishop here. I think I need this in my defense. But I said, okay, so what? I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to attack the queen. And here I'm going to just keep starting to roll. So here, the important point is you need to strike while the iron is hot. I've got space here. I've got a clear path here to try and attack the weakened king. So f4, knight c4, and I play bishop d5, again, just to kick this knight away. It goes in, trying to attack my queen, but I've got some nice defenses, queen f5, and Julia here tries to keep pushing forward to maybe try and find some tactics, but there's really nothing here. Because my queen's now in a really nice spot here to try and attack the king, and yes, this bishop has developed from the ugly d1 square, but what are you looking at? You're looking at nothing. Knight takes d3 is a little bit of a nothing move. It's trying to swap the knight for 2 pawns and maybe take this rook at the end of it, but I just said, hey, look, I don't really care. I'm going to just keep rolling forward because your king is weak and you don't have many protectors. So after bishop takes, rook takes, knight takes f4 is played. Again, pawns for a knight just doesn't matter because my pieces are just rolling forward and the king is extremely unsafe. So after bishop d1, because the pawn is attacking the bishop, I now play e3. So you'll see this is a cunning tactic because I'm trying to just get a quick checkmate here. And after g3, this is actually not a threat because I've got the pin on the king. So I play knight f3 here to try and swap a knight for a bishop, and basically this is the last defender apart from this rook, but this bishop is annoying, so this is just another way to get some attack. And here I found the nice move, which is rook takes instead of bishop takes, because rook takes here protects this pawn, but crucially I'm actually threatening a check here and checkmate because there are no squares remaining for the king to survive. So after king h2, I played bishop e5 and c6 and rook, bishop takes g3. The king is just completely lost in itself. There's no defenders and there's no win. If pawn takes, I just do queen takes, king h1, and there are many wins here. But if you see that there's also a kind of a pin here, so rook takes f1, it's fine. But Julia plays king h1, and here I play bishop d6, and again, I wanted to stop any sort of checks here, and it turns out here it doesn't even matter because I was protecting that square, but I played bishop d6 to try and stop things, but just to stop this while threatening this checkmate. It's fun, but queen takes d6, rook takes h3, and you can see that it just completely is over because this is checkmate. You can't move the king anywhere because it's double check, and you can't move the king here because of this queen. So what you just saw here was a completely it was a real annihilation as soon as I got the space, and it just shows that after a simple move like f6, which is wrong, it gives white an advantage. If you don't strike immediately, which is here, if you don't strike immediately with knight takes c6, bishop c6, and c4, you can cause yourself a lot of problems as white. But overall, a pretty great game for me. I made that obvious one inaccuracy. Yes, I made one inaccuracy, which is f6, where I could have played a little bit more solidly. But overall, a pretty great game.